Let me tell you something. We see these incredible high-tech ambulances on the road today, and we just take them for granted. They're like mobile emergency rooms, packed with more gear than a space shuttle. But it wasn't always this way. You have to rewind the clock, way back to the late 1800s, to see where it all started. The first ambulances weren't about high-speed chases or flashy lights. They were about one simple, noble idea: getting a sick or injured person to a doctor. It was a brand new concept, and it began with the most basic machine you can imagine. The very first ambulances were nothing more than handcarts. Think about that for a minute. We're talking about a simple two-wheeled cart, like something you'd use to move sacks of grain. The Bischofsheim handcart from the 1880s is a perfect example. It was pushed and pulled by dedicated volunteers, moving slowly through cobblestone streets. There was no engine, no suspension, just pure muscle power. The patient would lie on a simple stretcher, and the journey would have been bumpy and slow. But for its time, it was a revolutionary step forward. It was the first organized effort to bring medical transport to the people. Soon after, people realized they needed more power. Human strength has its limits, especially when you're trying to move quickly. So they turned to a reliable source of horsepower: actual horses. The horse-drawn ambulance became the standard by the 1890s. These were essentially covered wagons, but they were designed specifically for medical transport. They offered a little more protection from the weather, and a slightly smoother ride than the handcarts. The driver sat up front, guiding the horses, while the patient lay in the back. It was still a long way from modern comfort, but it was a big improvement in speed and range. These early horse-drawn vehicles were the workhorses of their time. They served cities and battlefields, carrying the wounded with a sense of urgency that was new to medicine. Imagine the sound of hooves clattering on the pavement, a signal that help was on the way. These wagons weren't just about transport, they were a symbol of hope. They represented a growing understanding that getting a patient to care quickly could mean the difference between life and death. It was the dawn of emergency medical services, and it all started with a simple cart and a couple of strong horses. Alright, so we had horses, and they did a fine job. But you know me, I love an engine. And that's exactly what came next. The turn of the 20th century brought the internal combustion engine, and it changed everything, including how we save lives. The first gasoline-powered ambulances started showing up in the early 1900s. A great example is the Palliser gasoline ambulance. This thing was a game-changer. It wasn't just a little faster than horses, it was a leap into a new age. It didn't get tired, it could travel much farther, and it started the real race against the clock. The early motor ambulances were built on the chassis of the first cars. They were often custom jobs, with a simple enclosed box on the back to hold a stretcher. These vehicles, like the motor ambulances used in World War I, were tough and built for terrible conditions. They had solid tires and basic engines, but they could navigate muddy, crater-filled roads to rescue soldiers from the front lines. The increased speed meant that a wounded soldier had a much better chance of survival. These vehicles proved, without a doubt, that the age of the horse was over for emergency transport. The engine was king. As we rolled into the 1920s and 30s, ambulance design started to get a little more sophisticated. You started seeing custom-built bodies from companies like W&G Ducros and Talbot. The vehicles began to look less like repurposed trucks and more like the ambulances we recognize today. They had longer bodies to give attendants more room to work, and more graceful, rounded shapes that were popular at the time. Engines got more powerful and reliable, and features like pneumatic tires made the ride a little less bone-jarring for the patient. You could really see the auto industry's influence. By the 1940s, especially during World War II, the technology took another jump. Ambulances like the Daimler models were built on robust car and truck platforms. They were designed for reliability and function above all else. The focus was on creating a stable environment for the patient and carrying more basic medical supplies. While they were still primarily for transport, the idea of providing care en route was starting to take hold. These vehicles were the bridge between the old, get 'em there, philosophy, and the modern treat 'em there, approach that would come to define the next generation. After the wars, things really started to accelerate. The 1960s and 70s were a turning point. A landmark report called the White Paper came out in the United States and highlighted major problems in emergency care. This pushed the industry to innovate like never before. Ambulances got bigger. way bigger. We moved away from the station wagon and hearse-based models to the van and truck-based chassis we see today. The iconic Bedford and Morris vans in the United Kingdom, and the high-top vans in the United States created a ton of interior space. This wasn't just for comfort, it was for equipment. Suddenly, there was room for more than just a stretcher and a first aid kit. These new larger ambulances could carry media group, oxygen tanks in ambulance, defibrillator in ambulance, advanced medical kits in ambulance, monitoring equipment in ambulance stock distribute equally, oxygen tanks, defibrillators, advanced medical kits, and monitoring equipment. This is when the ambulance truly started its transformation from a transport vehicle into a mobile medical unit. Paramedics now had the room and the tools they needed to begin life-saving treatments right on the scene and continue them on the way to the hospital. The vehicle itself became an active part of the medical intervention. It was a huge philosophical shift in emergency medicine. The evolution continued through the 1980s and 90s with vehicles like the Land Rover four-wheel drive ambulances and the dependable DAF and LDV models. The Land Rover was particularly important because it could go anywhere. Rough terrain, snow, mud, it didn't matter. This meant that emergency care could reach rural and remote locations that were previously inaccessible. At the same time, the boxy, truck-based designs became the standard. This modular design allowed for more customization and even more space for the ever-growing list of high-tech gear that paramedics needed to do their jobs. Safety also became a huge priority. Older ambulance designs weren't always the safest in a crash. The new models incorporated media group, modern ambulance with strong frame, ambulance suspension system, ambulance braking system, ambulance with airbags. Stock distributes equally. Stronger frames, better suspension and braking systems, and eventually, airbags and other modern safety features. The focus was on protecting both the patient and the medical crew. Think about it. You're often speeding through traffic, so the vehicle has to be stable and secure. These decades were all about making the ambulance a safe, effective, and reliable workspace for medical professionals on the move. They were no longer just drivers, they were clinicians. And that brings us to today, 2025. The ambulances you see on the road, like the Mercedes Sprinter or Ford Transit, are technological marvels. They are essentially emergency rooms on wheels. They're packed with telemetry systems that send a patient's vital signs directly to the hospital in real time. This means the doctors in the ER are already prepared before the patient even arrives. They have powered stretchers to reduce crew injuries, advanced cardiac monitors, ventilators, and cabinets full of life-saving drugs. The level of care that can be delivered in the back of one of these vehicles is simply astonishing. We're even seeing the next big shift, just like when we went from horses to gasoline. The move to electric. Companies are developing all-electric ambulances like the e-Sprinter. This is fantastic for a few reasons. First, it's better for the environment, reducing emissions in our cities, but there are practical benefits too. Electric vehicles can provide quiet, smooth, and vibration-free power for all the sensitive medical equipment on board, without needing to keep a noisy diesel engine idling. This creates a much better environment for both the patient and the paramedic. It's the next logical step in vehicle technology. So what's next? The future is incredibly exciting. We're looking at concepts that seem like science fiction. Think about autonomous ambulances. A vehicle that can navigate traffic on its own would allow the entire medical crew to focus 100% on the patient, instead of one person having to drive. We might also see smaller, more nimble response vehicles, maybe even drone ambulances designed to reach patients in dense urban areas or disaster zones where a full-size truck can't go. The vehicle will become even more integrated into a network of smart city and healthcare systems. From a simple handcart, pushed by volunteers, to an autonomous, electric, data-streaming mobile hospital, the journey of the ambulance is incredible. It's a story about technology, sure, but it's really a story about people and our enduring drive to save lives. Each new gear, each new engine, each new design has been about one thing: giving a person in their worst moment the best possible chance to see another day. And I have no doubt that the innovation will continue, because that's just what we do. We're always looking for a better, faster, and smarter way to get the job done.